the second half of this quarter, we've been working on improving your writing, not just improving your thinking. And I think chapter 15 and even chapter 16 are crucial in improving your writing. So there's a lot of information in chapter 15, but hopefully you can absorb it and apply it, because this is the heart of improving your writing. So chapter 15 is all about organization, and it goes into some detail on how to improve that. So one thing that is helpful to at least have a basic understanding of is deduction and induction. And it's basically just how you organize your thoughts, whether you want to start with a thesis statement, show a bunch of examples, and then conclude about it, or you can start with a bunch of examples, analyze them, and then come up with your thesis or main statement about that. So the reason I want to bring this up is because it helps you to understand thesis placement and why theses can be placed in different parts of your paper. And deduction and induction are a perfect example of that. Do you want to start with your thesis first and then build from that through examples? Or do you want to use those examples, then analyze them and find similarities, and then state your thesis? So if you look at figure 15.1 in the textbook, you can see that it's just a really good visual for what deduction and induction are. So if you're not quite understanding the terms, just look at the diagrams and it shows it pretty clearly. So they're just different ways that you can organize your thoughts. You have to excuse me, I'm so congested today. I don't quite understand why, so I'm sorry. This chapter also talks a little bit more about thesis statements and how they help to shape your paper. So however you're formatting your thesis statement is actually going to determine the shape your paper takes. So they had, I think, 2 full chapters on thesis statements. So here's just a little bit more information about that and how your thesis relates to your organization. Because remember, it's that piece of your paper that ties everything together. So without a good thesis statement, your organization is going to be weak and your focus is going to be weak. So again, it's just another example of how important your thesis statement is to your paper. I sound so froggy. I'm so sorry. And then it has, the textbook has another little snippet on transitions. Transitions, I believe we've already talked about as well, but it helps to, I like what they say in this chapter about transitions in how it relates to your logic or your thinking. So your transitions help take your reader through your thought process, whether you're doing induction or deduction, yes. Your transitions can help with that. So no matter what your organization is, however you choose to build your paper, it's the transitions. My gosh, can't even talk today. It's your transitions that pull it all together. Okay, so your thesis creates the focus throughout whatever type of organization you have, and it's your transitions that creates that flow of thought. So they're both extremely important. Not going to spend a lot of time on ethos, pathos, and logos. I just want you to have a basic understanding of them, because rhetoric, as we talked about in the beginning of the quarter, is how your writing is going to be perceived. So ethos right here is just the perceived character of the author. So the key word there is perceived. That doesn't mean you have to be. If we had an actual in-class format for this course, I would do activities with this to show you, exactly what this means in terms of, or just actually see it in practice. So ethos is just how you're perceived. Do you want to be perceived as intelligent? Do you want to be perceived as approachable? Do you want to be lighthearted? Do you want to be serious? It's all about what you want to be perceived as. And it's not based in reality, really. It's just how you formulate your paper and your phrasing to reflect what your reader wants, what you want your reader to think about you. Pathos or pathos is the emotion that you want to put in the writer. Do you want to grip at somebody's heartstrings and make them sad? Do you want to make them angry? and why. You have to think about all this stuff. Why would you want to make them sad or angry? What emotional aspects of your paper can you draw in to get your point across? And then logos is the logical side. Things like statistics and examples and things like that will help show that your argument's logical. And that just creates a different depth to your writing. The 3 different strategies they have can really help your organization if you're stuck. You can do the climatic, which tends to be pretty natural, a natural way of writing. So you'll probably find that, oh yeah, I kind of do that already. And that's more for when you want to build towards something toward the end of your paper. So I guess it would be more deduction, I think. I don't know. Like I say, I don't work in terms of deduction and induction, but it's just good to understand those terms. You can do comparison contrast. Do you want to compare one and then another separately, or do you want to compare them at the same time? So there are 2 different organizations within comparing and contrasting. And then with the concession and refutation, you say, well, I do see this other side, but here's some more information more along my lines. So even when you argue, you can concede, which means to take the opposite stance. But then when you refute, it takes it back to your stance, if that makes any sense at all. In English 201, you should get more of that if any of you take it. It's just a different form of arguing and shows that you have perspective, that you can give some ground, but then pull it back to your own argument. Paragraphing is essentially just the writing of a paragraph, because when you break your paper into parts, you've got your introduction, it's part 1, then you've got your body paragraphs, that's part 2, then your conclusions, part 3. So paragraphing is the middle. I'm not talking about introductions or conclusions, that's coming next. These are just your body paragraphs. So do not think that your introduction and your conclusion necessarily have to adhere to this information. This is simply your body paragraphs, the main content of your paper. And I love that the textbook describes your paragraphs as mini papers, because essentially they are. You should have a topic sentence in each of your body paragraphs that includes a transition, because that transition helps with your logic and your thinking, like we've already talked about. Your topic sentence says what the paragraph's about. You then develop that topic sentence through examples and support. That's kind of like your body paragraphs in your whole paper. And then in your final sentence or sentences, you draw it together, you make a strong point, and then you transition into the next point, essentially. Okay, so paragraphs have a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like your paper does. They're very, very similar. And your paragraphs cannot have strength if they don't have development and support, just like your paper can't have strength if it doesn't have development and support. You need to transition between your sentences, among your sentences, in your paragraphs, just like you need transitions among your paragraphs in your paper. Does that make sense? Your paragraphs are little mini papers. They follow the same organization and thought. Unity and development. Unity is tying everything together, making everything unified, making everything work toward the common goal of whatever your argument is. So when I say that you need unity in your writing, it means that things are scattered, that they're not connected. Simple things like transitions will help fix that and add unity. Referencing other things that you've already talked about, that adds unity. And then development, of course, is just developing your ideas and explaining them well enough and telling your reader everything that you need to know. With your length, your paragraph should never be more than half a page long. If they're too short, you haven't developed enough. If they're too long, you're overdeveloping, or you're having too many thoughts at one time, or you're babbling on endlessly, and you don't need to do that. So you need to be concise, yet well developed. So it's finding a balance in all of that. So if your paragraphs are 3 sentences long, they're probably too short. Now, the book does mention that you can have short paragraphs for emphasis, so that's kind of an exception. But even in academic writing, you don't see that very often. That's more creative, in my opinion. If you have a short paragraph, that should be a red flag. If you have an overlong paragraph, that should be a red flag. So keep it about a half a page, give or take a line or two. Okay. It's pretty standard. Chapter also talks about your sentences, and your sentences are the heart of your paragraph, and your paragraphs are the heart of your paper. So you really have to be aware of the power that your sentences have to influence your reader. That's why I stress so much about transitions, and that's why you need unity and development within your body paragraph, because it's your sentences that do that. You need to alternate the types of sentences you use so you're not redundant and choppy, but you don't want to be overly complex either. If you have a sentence that's 3 lines long, it's too complex and your reader can't follow it. And more than likely, if it's that long, it's ungrammatical at the same time. So just be aware of your sentences and the words that you use and the transitions you use, because this sentence is the basic element of your entire paper. It's the sentences that carry the power, because once they're joined together, they create your paragraphs, and then they create your paper as a whole. So be very conscious of the sentences that you write and formulate. Look at the paragraph structures. It's just kind of a guide that the book gives you. It's kind of like the common strategies for organizing up here. It gives you a number of ways to organize your paragraphs. So I'm not going to go in depth with those right now, but it's good for you to review and have at least a basic understanding on how you can construct your paragraphs to have the most power within them. Because you don't always have to have a topic sentence, 3 developing supporting sentences, and then a transitional sentence. I mean, that goes back kind of to the 5-paragraph essay that the book talks so vehemently against. So, I mean, I did say that they're like mini papers for that reason, and it is true. You do need to have those elements in there, but there are multiple ways in order to accomplish that. Okay, so paragraphing is so important. If you don't understand these concepts, reread and make sure you understand them, and make sure you start applying them as you revise your papers for your portfolio, because this is the heart of writing. If you have weak paragraphs, your whole paper will be weak. So be aware of that, and let me know if you have any questions about any of this.